morning.
Good morning. I hope that you all have your headphones. We're going to start our meeting. I'm Madame Yonke Simon, the official member of the staff of the department in charge of. And certainly you have heard of the International Center for Girls and Women's Education in Africa. This is a specialized center of the African Union, and we'll have the opportunity to know more about this center. I would like to start with a short introduction before the opening ceremony starts. Honorable Safia Ali Najib will, second Vice President of PAP, Honorable Lahai Bernadette, fourth Vice President of PAP, Honorable Suleima Al-Kaf, third Vice President of PAP, and Honorable Asma Umed Bil, Chairperson of the Committee on Gender, Honorable Abdul Diaye, Chairperson of the Committee on Education of PAM, Dr. Rita, Coordinator of the Center at the AU, all members of the Parliament present here, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like, on behalf of the Commissioner, His Excellency Gikunga, to thank you for your presence here, and also invite two honorables to take the floor here on the occasion of the opening ceremony. That is the second Vice President of PAP and Dr. Rita Bissomart, who will make a short introduction here. I would like also to explain to you the program. The program will start with the opening ceremony. Then will be a brief presentation of the AU-CIEFFA and objectives of the session. The presentation will be made by Rita Bissonot. And then there will be a first presentation that is on a document which the African Union CIEFFA has prepared on the legislation relating to girls and women's education, and also documents that exist at the international and regional level on girls and women's education rights, but focused particularly on the education of girls. In this presentation will allow you to know all the instruments that we have to date and whether we have enough instruments on girls and women's education in Africa. And then you will have the opportunity of asking your questions and ask for clarifications on this presentation. And then a second presentation will be presented by Ruth Odiomba Ora. She is our consultant. She is also a professor of law at the Faculty of Law in Naburo in Kenya. After this presentation, which will be followed by a discussion, there will be a second presentation on the status of implementation of all these policies and instruments. How far have we implemented these instruments on girls and women's education, and the way forward, and also whether we do really need to have a specific legal instrument on girls and women's education in Africa, because it doesn't exist. We have various policies, but we do not really have any specific instrument on this issue. And after this second presentation, you will make comments, and the floor will be open on questions and answers and contributions. Afterwards, after this presentation and the discussion in the plenary, we will then have a third presentation, which will be made by Ms. Ramatullah Yai, who is a policy officer at the African Union on Gender and Development. She will speak to us about the AU gender architecture, and she will mention most particularly everything that has to do with girls and women education, and also the status of implementation of the various instruments. We will have then the possibility to request for clarification. You have probably seen also on the program that another presentation was due to be made by an NGO. Unfortunately, this presentation will not be made, but this will allow us more time for discussion. So following all this, in the afternoon, we'll have the opportunity of having a communiqué which was drafted, your communiqué, in fact, which will give you an update of all that has been discussed here, and also the commitments of the parliamentarians on the issue of education of girls and women. So one of the parliamentarians will present his communiqué. You will make your contributions and hope that this communiqué will become your document, and use it in order to submit it to other AU organs in order for the issue to be discussed at the level of the executive council and the summit, and also try to fight against preventing girls from going to schools. And then we will end our workshop with closing remarks, which will be made by one member, Honorable Asna Umeld Bilil, and words by the AU-CIEFFA. So this is our program. I thank you very much, and without any delay, I would like to give the floor now to the second Vice President, Honorable Safia Alima. You have the floor, madam. I thank you for giving me the floor. First, let me express to the participants a very good day, wish them a very good day, dear colleagues, Vice Presidents, Dr. Rida Bissaworth from the African Union CFA, Excellency, distinguished clerk, dear colleagues, members of PAP, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to be amongst you once again, and I would like to seize this opportunity which is offered to me to wish you a warm welcome on the occasion of this joint workshop, which has brought together on such an important theme, that is the education of women, spouses, girls for their self-empowerment, for their empowerment. Allow me to commend this initiative for collaboration among our various organs for the effective implementation of the various programs and projects that have been adopted by our heads of state and government. The outcome of these efforts within the African Union will allow us, without any doubt, to improve the living conditions of our populations thanks to the socio-economic development of our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to recall that our social traditions and religious traditions have slowed down the education of women and girls in most of our countries. Studies have shown that women represent 2/3 of the illiterate persons throughout the world, and there are 30 million of girls who have reached the schooling age who do not go to school or leave early. This alarming situation could be explained either through early marriage caused by parents or by poverty. In this case, girls are sacrificed in the profit or for the benefit or for boys or for reasons of inadequate infrastructure. Education is the key for success and allows to promote relationships of equality. It reinforces women's empowerment and reduces the conflict of power between them and men, which are very often identified as the cause of violence against them. Before this situation, the African Union has created an international center for girls and women's education in order to analyze the causes of this situation and propose appropriate solutions to the African continent. We are confident that during this exchange, this center will tell us about the exact situation of the education and training of girls and women on the continent. Undoubtedly, we do observe some hope through these political women who do have important positions, those who lead important companies. But efforts remain to be done in order to improve our legal and institutional framework for the right for girls and women education in Africa. This is the object of our brainstorming this morning. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we as parliamentarians, in collaboration with the civil society and other stakeholders, have the duty and the obligation to educate our population without any distinction based on gender, because, as you said, and as one thinker has said, and I quote, each child whom we educate is a man of the future. This forum, I hope, will allow us to develop strategies in order to play effectively our role of oversight through concrete actions in order to ensure basic education for all in the various areas that we represent. This will allow a better promotion of equality among the persons and prevent violence against women. On this, I wish you a very good day of work and declare officially the opening of this proceeding. Thank you very much. Shukran.
Je vais céder la parole à...
I give the floor now to the presenter.
Honorable Safia Alimi Jibril, Second Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament. Honorable Smila Beiruk, I'm sorry if I am not pronouncing your names properly, First Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament. Honorable Bernadette Lahai, Fourth Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament. Honorable Chair of the Committees of Education, Honorable Chair of the Committee of Gender, Honorable Vipia Marawa, Secretary General of the PAP, Honorable Members of the Pan-African Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, all protocol observed. It is for me a great honor to take the floor at such a meaningful institution on behalf of the African Union Commissioner for Human Resources, Science, Technology, His Excellency Mr. Paul Martial de Ukunga, and on my own name to greet you this morning. I would like to thank all of you honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament for coming to our meeting this morning, and thank also all the staff of the Pan-African Parliament for arranging this opportunity for the AU-CIEFFA to interact with you as we are putting in place the legal environment to facilitate the implementation of rights to education to girls and young women in our continent. As you know, this year in the African Union is the year of harnessing the demographic dividend. And to harness and to reap the demographic dividend, this cannot happen without education, and more specifically, girls' education. So I am truly grateful to you, Honorable Chair of the Pan-African Parliament, for allowing this meeting to take place for us to address the legal instruments that are both relevant to human capital development in Africa and to ensure quality and sustainable schooling for all our children on an equal basis with respect to the laws protecting their rights to education. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing, as the Vice President just mentioned, so many challenges that are slowing down girls and women in their educational processes, their education acquisition, their personal emancipation, and the economic empowerment of Africa. So us, in the AU-CIEFFA, we are striving to seek for appropriate policies, effective strategies, and adequate initiatives, all supported by valid legal instruments to accelerate right-based and gender-sensitive strategies for girls' education on the continent. We are seeking for sustainable impact, for effective and efficient livelihoods and job opportunities leading to positive and constructive changes. Honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, you all know that the African Union has placed education at the center of its development programs for the continent and the development of its human capital. And this is key to achieving positive results in any endeavor that we may undertake. As testimonies to this, there are numerous frameworks that have been put in place by the African Union and its partners to ensure not only a quality education, but also gender equality in education. I just want to name a few which you might have heard of. First of all is the Agenda 2063, the Continental Education Strategy for Education for Africa, the STISA, the Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa, and the TVET Strategy, Technical Vocation Education and Training. AU-CIEFFA is one of the implementation arms of the African Union and its commitments, which targets the improvement of girls' and women's education and uses the adopted AU frameworks and other international policies for the implementation of its programs. We also know that there is no possible and credible development for any country on the continent unless all projects, programs, and initiatives take foundation on human rights, the respect of rights in all segments of the society, including girls and women. This is why, under the leadership of the African Union, member states have adopted and ratified various legal instruments and frameworks on education and on girls' and women's education, the goal being which to accelerate social changes necessary for an inclusive socio-economic development of Africa through the appropriate implementation of those instruments. As you are aware, there are good initiatives, fruitful practices that are being undertaken in many of our member states, including some partial implementation of some laws, convention, charters. However, still a lot needs to be done regarding the consideration of strong and efficient legal environments to facilitate access, retention, transition, and achievement of our girls and our young women in all our education systems, but also to protect them while they are in our educational systems. Africa is still facing numerous challenges in this domain and needs to get around and needs to set ground for the effective inclusion and the use of efficient rights-based approaches enabling parity, equity, and equality. If we are here today as the AU-CIEFFA to meet with you, honorable members of the African Parliament, it means that we together have a common agenda to accomplish. AU-CIEFFA, by organizing this session here in Midrand, South Africa, we would like to acquaint you, members of the Pan-African Parliament, on the status of existing legal instruments and other frameworks that pertain directly or indirectly to girls' and women's education in Africa. Therefore, the compendium developed on global, continental, regional, and national legal framework and policies relating to education will be presented to you, as well as a framework to monitor the implementation of these legal instruments and policies on girls' and women's education in Africa. This workshop also represents for the AU-CIEFFA an opportunity to learn more about existing policies taken up by national parliaments and governments and any other good practices that can help us advance the achievement of our respective mandate towards human development. We will be outlining the reasons that explain the difficulty to retain girls in the educational systems, as well as difficult transition and low achievement rates in Africa. It is just a figure for you to know we only have about 20% of our girls in Africa who complete the full spectrum of secondary education, and this is a very low figure. If we want to achieve economic and social development of Africa, we really need to go beyond this figure of 20%. It is important for us to renew commitments on stronger recommendations, improve our school environment, and ensure that responsibilities are shared with the exact role of all concerned stakeholders. Honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, I have no doubt that all of us present in this workshop today are already convinced of the value of this subject of discussion. It is my deep hope that at the end of this workshop, you will share and discuss the real status of the legal instruments and policies guiding education in Africa in general, and girls' and women's rights to education in particular. We will also leave this workshop with an agreed final communiqué which will guide us on what we want to do and how we can help each other in the process of achieving our objectives in favor of girls' and women's education in Africa. In one sentence, education. Convinced that the outcome of this workshop will be up to the current challenges and our expectations, I wish to all of us successful proceedings and meaningful interactions. Thank you. Merci. Shukran. Obrigado.
Je tiens à remercier au nom
I would like to, in the name of all the members of parliament here present, I would like to thank Dr. Rita Bissonuti, who is the coordinator of the AU-CIEFFA. I would really like to thank you for your presentation. It was very clear, and extremely enlightening, and I really would like to thank you in the name of all of us here present. Now I would like to start by giving the floor to Dr. Ruth Odhiambo-Ora, who is the consultant for the AU and the CIEFFA. Right, we're going to, in fact, continue with the presentations. Dr. Rita Bissonuti, in fact, is actually going to present something before, and it will be a presentation. It's an outline of the legislation relating to girl and women's education. Dr. Rita, you have the floor.
I would just like briefly to introduce to you what is the AU-CIEFFA. I'm sure most of you have never even heard of this institution. So this is an institution which became a specialized institution of the African Union in 2004. Okay. Sorry, just getting used to this. All right, sorry. So, as I said, it became a specialized institution of the African Union in 2004, and we have been operational only since end of 2014. So we have been operational now for the last for the past 2 years. This center is based in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. It is a center which is hosted by the government of Burkina Faso. Oops, I'm sorry. What is our mission? Our mission is in line with Agenda 2063. For those of you who do not know what is Agenda 2063, Agenda 2063 is the vision of what we want Africa to look like in 50 years' time. If you're interested in Agenda 2063, you can go to the AU website, to the African Union website, where you have copies of Agenda 2063, as well as the 10-year implementation strategy of Agenda 2063. So as I said, our mission is to ensure that all women, that all African women are empowered in all spheres of life, that they have equal social, political, and economic rights, as well as opportunities to fight against all forms of violence. We do have a copy of our AU strategic plan of 2015 and 2017. You might have found it outside on the tables, if you are interested to have more an insight of our AU strategic plan, of which we have 4 key areas. The first area concerns the legal framework for rights of girls and women to access education in Africa. And this is one of the reasons why we are here today in this meeting. The second key priority is gender-responsive teaching and learning environments in Africa. The third one is retention of girls in schools, and the fourth one concerns advocacy. So I want to say, why are we having this meeting, this legal framework, this meeting today with you with PAP? We have had several meetings in the past, and in all the meetings, it has been underlined the importance of involving parliamentarians to understand what are the challenges that you face in the implementation of documents, of legal documents that you have ratified in your own countries. There are so many charters which Dr. Ruth afterwards is going to present to you. There are many charters, there are many protocols, there are many acts under which education, which concerns education, girls' education. These have been ratified in the member states. But what is happening? Why is it not being implemented really in our countries? So this is one of the meetings that we had with our different member states and stakeholders last year in Ouagadougou. And this is where we presented the compendium on regional and international legal frameworks, as well as we discussed on the framework for monitoring and evaluation legal instruments in the different countries. These documents will be presented to you later, where you will have time to interact more with the consultant who has been working very closely on this document. The second project, another big project on which we are working on, is gender-sensitive teaching and learning environments. As you know, many of us, as we go up in higher education, there are less women in many, many areas. And one of the reasons that we have found, especially in areas of STEM, science, technology, education, engineering, and mathematics, is why do we have so few girls in engineering, in mathematics? Is it because the curriculum doesn't correspond to them? Is it because of the gender? Is it because of the teaching and learning environment? Is it because the professor doesn't know how to speak to a woman student? So we have started a project in the Pan-African University. The Pan-African University is a key project of the African Union Commission. We have 5 Pan-African universities in the continent: Kenya, Nigeria, Algeria, Cameroon, and the 5th one is in South Africa. The 5th one is going to be on space sciences. So we have been to the different Pan-African universities to see what is exactly happening in these Pan-African universities. How are they responding to the gender dimension of the teaching and learning environments? So this is a document which we will be presenting in a couple of months in another meeting. We are hoping to have this meeting in Mauritius in July on this aspect. Our third project on which we have been working, you know that we now talk of an inclusive education. Inclusive education means to include all types of learners, whether they are slow learners, learners who learn very quickly. We are talking of learners who have remedial problems, learners who have physically handicapped. So we conducted case studies of which you have a copy on your table on what does it mean, what does inclusive education mean for them in the countries. We chose 5 countries from the 5 regions of Africa. You know that for the African Union, we are divided up in 5 regions, north, south, east, west, and central. And we work through our implementing arms, which are our regional economic communities. And it was the regional economic communities which chose the 5 countries, of which you have them in the different, which you have in the case studies in front of you. And we came up with very interesting findings. So I will not go into the nitty-gritty of the findings, but just so that if you do have the time, please do go through the document to understand what is happening in girls' and women's education in some of the countries. These are examples of good practices. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.
Merci, Docteur.
Thank you very much, Bissonou. Thank you very much for your presentation, which was very interesting, and I think it will allow each and everyone, in fact, to understand really what has to be done, and also will allow us, it will feed into the discussion this morning. As we have finished the first 2 presentations, I suppose we are going to take up the discussion and the debate. So I would like to ask the members of parliament here present to ask questions. And afterwards, Dr. Rita Bissonou will try to respond to your questions. So we're going to work, in fact, we're going to work by series of questions. So I think we will wait for all the questions that are going to be asked and then respond. So I think Dr. Rita will in fact wait for all the questions to be asked and then we'll respond to them. So thank you very much once more, Dr. Rita Bissonou, and the debate is open. Niger, honourable member from Niger, Amina. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The day today, and this date, 13th of May, is in fact dedicated to the International Women's Day in Niger in 2017. And I would like to take advantage of this occasion to really wish a very happy day to all the women here present. In Niger, in fact, if we see the relationship between girl and boy education, in fact, to the girls, it's a level far inferior to the boys educated, which means that boys have a far greater opportunity of being schooled than girls. And if we look at the final figures as well, when we look at the completion of even primary school is higher with boys than with girls. And that, of course, explains the big disparity in education. We've also got early marriage, unfortunately, and I'm going to interrupt you, honourable member. I think the microphones, unfortunately, there seems to be a problem with the translation. I'm sorry. You need to switch off your mics. Right, okay. So it looks, can you hear the translation? Honorable? Is it Arabic or is it English? The translation into Arabic we do not have. Could you help us, please? No, still not? Please, could we have a look? And why is there no translation into Arabic? No, no translation. Okay, right. What do we need to do? What do we need to do? Where are the technicians? Do we have technicians in the room so that they could perhaps go and look in the booths and have a look at what is the problem?
Oui. S'il vous plaît.
Please. I think they're trying to fix the problem where the booths are concerned. Honorable Amina, we apologize, but we would like, of course, everybody to be able to share your presentation, to share in the listening. Okay, I think it's all done, Honorable. You have the floor again. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The maintaining of social norms, unfortunately, which favors child labor and early marriage, the very high rate of illiteracy also amongst adults, is something that, of course, prevents schooling amongst children, and particularly girl children. The persistence of disparities between girls and boys, between different citizens, and also between the rich and the poor, this continues to be a major challenge. The girl child schooling, unfortunately, responds to a great deal of different beliefs, which is why in 2012, different Muslim women's associations, in fact, were against a draft law which was imposed. These associations, in fact, exercised some pressure on the members of parliament to, in fact, sent this draft law to be revised. When we've in fact got a problem in terms of girls who are married during their school years, in fact, if you oblige a girl to be married before she has finished her education, there will in fact be a penalty. So parents now have the right, in fact, to intervene. So the fact that we've now introduced articles in the law which, unfortunately, there are some of these articles which lead, in fact, to girls who may disobey the law, which means that many parents do not, in fact, register their children. At the moment, our technical and financial partners have taken measures to try and improve the performance capacity, both in terms of quality and quantity of girls. We've now got also the acquisition of new school infrastructure. We've got a larger number of teachers. We've now got obligatory education until the age of 16. We are trying to also promote the education of girl children. And we now also have at government level a department who is responsible for attempting to also keep girls in school longer. So there is also a support, a pedagogical support also for girls. So there is also the implication of parents who also need to be involved in the education of their children and in the management of schools. So there is a revision, in fact, of all these texts, of legal texts, and also the training of teachers is very important, and also that we also have in mind gender. Thank you very much, Honourable Member of Parliament. The floor is given. I do not see any hands raised. Yes, you have the floor, ma'am. I would just like to, first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Rita Bissonud for her presentation. I am from Burkina Faso. And my name is Rukia Wamba, and I do appreciate greatly the work that the CIEFFA is in fact doing in Burkina Faso. The director is in fact somebody who promotes education, and I know what these people do to help women. But there is a problem. And in terms of where CIEFFA is concerned, the young girls who do not go to school, in fact, through the CIEFFA, they are able to take up, in fact, managing to catch up, in fact, through the work that they do to allow these girls, in fact, to be able to become someone in life. And notably, for example, there are various jobs of various employment that allow this. There is, however, a problem that remains in terms of the recruitment of these young girls. Very recently, there was, in fact, a bursary which was meant for girls, but we've often got cultural and education norms that unfortunately stay. Very often we find a young girl who takes the initiative, for example, who would like to be trained, but her husband refuses, and he doesn't allow. Or some of them, in fact, have been trained, and the husband does not allow them to exercise, in fact, their jobs. So I think that at this level, we should also be able to see whether we'd be able to introduce some measures, or perhaps psychologists would be able to, or find ways of discussing with the families of these young girls to be able to convince the members of the family to allow the young girls to exercise their jobs. Because when we speak about discrimination, I think that this is where, in fact, we do feel and we do experience this discrimination. We, as young members of parliament, we would like we ourselves would like to make a contribution in the promotion or towards the promotion of these young people and towards these conventional careers, because it's certainly very impressive when we see women, for example, work in the motor industry, or they work, for example, in air conditioning, which are normally jobs that are reserved to men. But unfortunately, very often we are faced with challenges which, for example, transport, or very often we see that these are young girls who come, in fact, from rural areas, which are often very far, and often, for example, there's an accommodation problem or a transport problem. So I feel that also at this level that we should also try to put in place, or put at the disposal of CIEFFA, for example, we should have a center, an accommodation center, which would, in fact, also facilitate the task for us. We do make our contribution, but perhaps it could also help us. I would also like to say that I am, in fact, a coordinator of the Gender Caucus in my country. So everything that has to do with gender and anything, in fact, in this area, that beyond this workshop, I would like us to continue our exchanges to be able what we can see, how we can actually benefit these young girls, and how we together and how we could continue helping one another. I certainly would like CIEFFA members also to be able to create a partnership, or that we could create other partnerships with CIEFFA so that we could make our own contribution. Thank you very much. Honorable Bokia, yes. I am going to give the floor to Dr. Lahai, who is the 4th Vice President.
Very much, Madam Chair. Let me join my colleagues to thank the AU Commission on Education, especially for girls, for being here with us this morning. Indeed, the education of women and girls is a prerequisite for development. No investment in education for women and girls is either too small or too big, because educating women and girls, the returns are even higher than educating men and boys. We are not saying that we should not educate men and boys, but when we look at the returns across all sectors, when women and girls are educated, they are very high, because their education impacts on the education of future generations, it impacts on maternal mortality, it impacts on the quality of life of families, communities, and a host of other things. So that is why I think we in the African Union, or the African Union, should really do everything to ensure that the legal instruments, the environment, and the finances for the education of women and girls are at the top of the agenda of the African Union. I have listened very carefully to the presentation, and maybe, I don't know at this material moment, but I would like the presenters, maybe even if not presenting the document, but maybe to give a little bit of information on the high-level dialogue that was held in January of this year in African Union on gender equality and education, because I think we came out with pertinent outcomes and action points from this high-level dialogue. Maybe if I will ask the organizers maybe to just print the outcomes of the 3 panels that we are looked into for the consumption of members. The issue of curriculum reform is really very important because it's going to really make a difference. Curriculum on gender equality, on women's empowerment is going to be key right through the primary, secondary, and also the tertiary levels. But let me also just draw our attention is that that curriculum is what we call the overt curriculum. That it is planned. But also, we should not forget about the unwritten or the hidden curriculum, because that is where also, you know, a lot of these values, mores, and perceptions are passed informally without knowing. But they have a very big impact. Like our homes, the perception about girls and women at our homes. If we look at our cultural folklores, the perception that women's education before now is really nothing. We have proverbs in our saying, we have perceptions in our culture that continues to really entrench this gender equality, you know, and sometimes, unfortunately, it is really passed on and consolidated by maybe our people, our women, our grandmothers, our mothers who are not educated, but who have lived in those societies, and they have been taught to actually believe some of these things. So while we look at the curriculum at the formal level, let us also see how those hidden curriculum really also affects, you know, what we think and do at all levels, especially for women and girls. This is what I can contribute so far to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much. I would like to now give the floor to Honorable Akatu. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would also like to congratulate Dr. Rita for the quality of her presentation and also for the work which has been effectuated by the International Center for the Education of Girls and Women in Africa, a center which has been put in place by the African Union. I think that the work which is done at this level would really be able to boost all the possibilities and the chances of a future for the girls on the African continent. I would like to focus particularly on the second project that she raised, the sensitization of the teaching environment so that more girls, in fact, would have opportunities and in fact to be guided also to go into particular careers or jobs that are normally reserved for boys. This is very important because I would like her to, in fact, be able to tell us a bit more about the strategy that should be adopted, because very often these careers like engineering, girls normally go into social subjects, sort of like health or education. So these careers that are very often like secretaries, nurses, teachers, that's mostly what girls do. So I would like to know what is the strategy that she would like to put in place to be able to reverse this tendency so that the choice is open to girls and to careers for girls, so that it could be far more open to sciences, for example, so that they would be able to pursue technical careers, and which would then be able to encourage girls to do that. For example, in Guinea, in my country, there was a girl who became very famous, Captain Binta, who is a pilot. She's the first woman to be a pilot in Guinea. But despite the authorities at the time really promoted, but unfortunately this had no follow-up, since we have not had any other women pilots. This, of course, is not just something that happens in developing countries, because I know that in Russia, for example, when we think of the first woman astronaut, Valentina Tereshkova, who was the first woman to become an astronaut and to go into space, up to now, unfortunately, not many women have followed her. So I do think that we really need to sensitize girls, and I would like you to give us more information, tell us a bit more about the strategy that is going to be used. The second concern is that you spoke about 5 Pan-African universities. I would like to know what are the admission criteria for these universities. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Honorable Zalikatu, and give the floor now to just behind you, madam. There are a lot of members requesting the floor, but I think that there are 2 other important presentations which will be made later, and you will be given the possibility of combining your questions. So I'll take 2 or 3 speakers, and then others will have the possibility of asking the questions later on, because certainly you will have the possibility of asking questions on the 2 other presentations. You have the floor, madam.
Agradecer senhora apresentadora, doutora.
I would like to thank the presenter and for the presentation of the documents that brought. And this will be able to help the countries in this room. Education is the key for everything. With education, we can increase women's self-esteem. She feels emancipated. She feels able to face everything and everybody. With education, the woman can contribute to her own health and to the well-being of the family. She can contribute to the maternal education and to the child education, because she will have access to information and she will be able to look for these services, and in this way, fewer mothers will die, fewer children will die. With education, women will also have access to information, and she will be able to earn more. She will know where to find the information, to have access to the land, to property, and she will contribute to food security as well. Education also allows all the objectives of sustainable development to be achieved, and especially objective number 4. I would like to ask the presenter if there is any specific legislation for the education of girls with handicapped girls, because we spoke about inclusion. Inclusion means that everybody has the right to have to opportunities. We know that sometimes in some countries, handicapped people have difficulties in having access to education. So I would like to know if the African Union has legislation or if it's working towards inclusive education for handicapped girls.
I thank you and give the floor to Samia from Sahara.
شكرا.
I thank you. I'm Samia Ahmed from the Western Sahara. I would like to thank Madam the chairperson and also thank the presenter and the organizers of this conference. I would like to say that, in fact, the legislation on education and also the value of education is very important. There'll be no justice and also no development without education. So I think that legislation on education is of paramount importance. And I think also that after legislation and also after reaffirming the right for education of girls and boys, then there should be measures which are important for the implementation of this legislation. During the phase of development after the reaffirmation and the setting up of legislation for education of girls, there should be also free education and also for education to be compulsory, and legislation shouldn't just be on paper. After making education compulsory, there should be also some supplementary programs which be set up, such as, for example, illiteracy, because there are girls and there are some past generation which did not have the chance to go to school at the schooling age and who need specific education programs of illiteracy and also some insertion in the labor market, and this is what was done in the Sahara despite the difficult conditions and also the known possibility of recovering our full sovereignty, and also girls who have lived under colonial rule and have not been possible to go to school. But now there has been a lot of political action which has been carried out, and we've been able through that to sort out this problem through literacy programs, and we have set up also specific schools on vocational training and also taken on board problems that are faced by the disabled. And we've also set up local schools at all levels of education where the disabled could also be taken care of. As for the issue of girls and women's education and legislation, I think that this should be sorted out by our countries, but there must be some preliminary actions and measures in order to facilitate access to this right. I thank you, Honourable. I think that we must be brief in our comments because there are a lot of requests for the floor. I give the floor now to Honourable Traoré. I thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm very keen on taking the floor at this stage, but I'm just noting that at this stage you're trying probably to give preference to ladies when asking for the floor, but we are among sisters and brothers. We know that in Africa, the education of women is a little bit problematic, because at a certain level of education, that is primary, for example, or countries, Arabic translation. Is it okay now? Is it coming through? Translation into Arabic, please.
Non?
It might be a technical problem.
Trouver une solution car nous sommes en train de perdre du temps. C'est bon? Toujours pas.
C'est samedi, ce problème.
C'est bon? C'est bon. OK. OK. Donc,
You can proceed. Thank you, madam. So I was saying that, so madam, the coordinator, with the support of the chairperson of the African Commission, are investing a lot of efforts because it's not about providing primary education. What is more important is to encourage and support these girls until the secondary and the university levels. And at this level, our countries are not really encouraging the girls and women, and some talents are being neglected. And also we must encourage girls as concerns vocational training and vocational education in order to have a school curriculum devoted to that, because our structures do not allow all our children, and particularly girls, to have access to those to go beyond the age of 18 in schools. And we must insert that because of marriage. When I was the chairman of a region, I have encouraged the initiative of allowing girls to go to some disciplines, and the first girls who were trained have been employed. So the most important is for them to get the diploma or the degree, and even if they were not very successful in their studies, if they get their diploma and degree, they can get, we have provided them with a position, with a job, because there can be no development without without women getting a decent jobs. So because men do not automatically support girls, but if women take care of themselves, then they will be successful. Thank you. I give the floor now to Honorable Hashim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah. Thank you, dear sister chairperson. In fact, I would like to thank Dr. Rita for this very good presentation, and also for the theme, this theme, which is very important, that is women and girls' education. I see that talking about that we are a little bit talking about generalities, and I would like to ask Dr. Rita whether there are any studies, any detailed studies that have been prepared by countries where they would show the disparities in detail, in order for us to be able to focus on this issue, and whether there is any legal study which shows legal disparities in some countries, in order to have a concrete basis for our debate, in order for us to benefit, and also try to take care of the difficulties that we have been referring to in terms of girls' education, because this even threatens the security of Africa, because the education is very important, and our peoples in Africa is divided between shepherds and farmers, and the countries are really facing important difficulties. So research and studies are very important at the level of the continent and also countries, although these studies require a lot of funds. And also and there was also a reference to the fact that religion prevents education of girls, but I do not think that Islam prevents that. And the Prophet has started his message by saying, read, iqra. And he also said that you have to learn science or study science from the cradle to the grave. So I think that the difficulties are of economic and cultural